Yeah. From the time I was a kid, this notion kind of fascinated me where if I turned right, something would happen. But what if I turned left? Or what if I just turned 3 degrees? And it kind of reminds me, I collect kaleidoscopes. And
Ooh.
you're looking at this beautiful image and you just turn it just a smidge and the whole picture changes. Every choice we make is moving us in, some direction. And we don't always know, that it's going to turn out the way we want. But being intentional increases the likelihood that there'll be alignment between the outcome and what we're wanting.
Well, welcome everyone back to the Sean Trey Show. I have a really awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. And thanks for having me, Sean. I'm Julie Winkle Giulioni, and I work in the space of leadership development and career development. I've written a couple of books. I work with organizations and leaders, and the work that I do really has to do with elevating the skills and the capacity of leaders to be able to create an environment that allows everyone to grow and reach their potential.
I love that. I was talking to someone the other day, well, actually to my daughter today, and she was up. We had a really great clean out of a space. I love my mother-in-law, but she's a hoarder, and she was traveling for 10 days, and we were like, okay, we are going to clean out the roof and the garden area, and we gutted it. And it's back to what it was a couple years ago, and it's functional again. And so we were up there having a bit of a barbecue tonight, and she ran downstairs and was like kind of disappeared. We're like, where's she at? And I came downstairs and she was on her device, on a device, not the one that she's let. And we were like, it's a school day. Weekdays, we don't have devices in our house that are being used. And when I sat down with her, she's like, well, why? My cousins use their devices. And I said, and you're not them. And we want you to have a better path forward than them, And I said, you skipped out on us all spending time together upstairs, which is something that you can't get back. And those videos, what are those videos going to bring you? And she was pushing me on this. She's like, well, why is it important? I said, because we want you to be the best that you can be, and part of that means doing other things, reading a book, listening to music, spending time with family and connecting, and it got me thinking about, am I the best version of Sean? There are times that I don't think I am. And I've always wanted to know, well, how can we be better? So to dive in, how can people be a better version of themselves?
Wow. How much time do you have, Sean?
Right?
This is probably a
Right?
life conversation, isn't it? I think at the end of the day, if I were to boil it down to sort of one macro principle, it really has to do with curiosity and learning. As I look at people who are really realizing their potential, activating their strengths and talents and gifts and making a difference. Those people tend to be ferociously curious and really
Mhm.
committed to constantly learning, pushing the envelope, figuring something new out, elevating the bar for the work that they're doing, being able to do it faster, whatever it might be. There's just this persistent need to look around, be curious, and figure out what's the next mountain or even little hill, that I'm going to climb, because the little hills and, kind of come together to make those mountains. So I
Yeah,
think, if somebody's really looking to be their best selves, getting curious and embracing learning is the way to go.
I love that. You know, the that was interesting because I was talking to a friend, and we were discussing kind of some different things that we grew up with and the way education was kind of given to us. And I remember one of my best teachers was a teacher named Keith Francis, and I studied with him for many years. And I never found out what he believed himself, but he always was challenging us, asking why. Whatever you picked, why? You want to choose that answer? Why? Why? And at first it made me crazy. And I was just like, just because it's what I want. And then I really found that he was just trying to get us to go deeper, to understand a deeper level of something, to not accept this surface level of ourselves or of our beliefs, just to really start to dig deeper and figure out the why, And now I see like all of these great books on what is your why. But yet I had this great experience in university on this.
Yeah. You know what I love about that is, in process improvement and problem solving, one of the standard tools that's used is the five whys. So when you're looking at a problem, trying to get down to the root cause, it's never the first why or the second
No.
why or the third why. It always takes that peeling back I know it's overused, peeling back the layers of the onion. And so, if that's how we do process improvement, why don't we do personal improvement the same way? Mr. Francis
100%.
had it right. And Mr. Francis, your teacher, was also really a masterful facilitator. And that's what I'm really seeing. Leaders who bring out the best in others, they're not telling people, what to do and why they should do it and how to do it. They are facilitating folks to come up with their own why, but also their own what's and hows and whens and all the rest of it as well. And that kind of facilitation is, it's a skill like anything else. But it's almost like, I think of it as almost like the yeast in bread. That kind of
Yeah.
facilitation is what makes everything rise, everything, puff up to its very best.
Well, and I love the idea of just making these things conscious too. Tonight, um, I my daughter was having her private class. I found all these great private tutors on Fiverr, and she loves it. She's like, I want to study chess, and she couldn't find a class at her school because it just didn't fit. She had to come home and do something, and so she's like, was really upset. So I found this teacher, this amazing teacher in India, Shushmita, and she's teaching my daughter chess, and my daughter loves it. But one of the things today is like my daughter jumped into a game they were playing on this chess website. And she just started moving. And the chess teacher slowed her down and she's like, okay, you're making bad moves. And my daughter was like, but what do you mean? And she's like, next time before you move, I want you to tell me what you want to do and why. All right, what are you going to do and why? And my daughter was like, but. And she's like, just slow it down. Explain it to me. And when she was able to talk through it, she was like, I want to move here because, and she's like, do you have a reason why yet? And she's like, no, I just kind of like it. And she's like, and the teacher was like, when you move forward in chess, there is never a just because I like it. There's always a reason why. What are you planning? What are you moving toward? And it was like the first aware time that my 8-year-old child has like had someone tell her that, these choices should be conscious and you have to figure out your motivation there, because in many areas of life, we're just, sure, we're cruising along, but in a game like chess, it's a win or lose, and there is this thing. And in our careers, most of us have this goal that we want to achieve something more, something better. But, we also kind of move along without thinking, we're just on autopilot half the time.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I've got to say, I love your use of Fiverr. It would have never occurred to me to use that for tutoring. But I think, what that really highlights in my mind is learning is so ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Opportunities to learn something, to develop a new skill, to practice a new capability. My gosh, Fiverr, AI, it's just YouTube, it's
Hmm.
all over the place. So kudos to you for finding such a creative way to keep your daughter off that device during the week.
Right.
Um, but um, I guess, what's interesting about what you were just describing, and man, she is a very fortunate 8-year-old to have this level of support and insight, whether she appreciates it now or
She
not. She
she
will
hates
down
me
the
right
line.
now. All of it, but I know she'll appreciate it in the future.
Welcome to parenting. They grow up and you get a lot smarter as they get older. But it's this role of intentionality because you're
Yeah.
right, and it makes sense. A lot of things we do need to do on autopilot. If we had to make conscious decisions to swallow and to do, like mundane things, I mean, we wouldn't get anything done. But some of the big stuff we relegate to that autopilot, and that's when people find themselves sitting in jobs for too long, languishing, not activating their skills, not enjoying the work, in relationships, sometimes that don't serve us. So that
Right.
intentionality is really, really key. And when we are intentional or maybe mindful or deliberate, I guess there are a lot of different ways we can frame this. When we're in that space of pausing and thinking, what am I trying to do here? We can make such better choices, that guide us forward. Just like, on the chessboard of life, if you will.
Right. It is the chessboard of life, and it's like, it is a puzzle. And so much of what we're working through is a puzzle because one of my guests the other day and I came on and I was talking about something that's going to date me a tiny bit, but um, when I was younger, I remember going to the library and they had these choose your own ending books, and I haven't seen them that popular anymore, but they were the craze in the 70s and 80s. And like you would read it and you go, okay, well, I make this choice and it goes this way. We forget that these little choices have these large implications, for down the road. But yet, it, there's not one path forward. There are many different ways that we can play this game, just like a chess game.
Mhm,
But if you are
mhm.
playing it right, whatever way you're playing it is going to optimize your growth and your potential. And so I think that it's just this constant shifting to see, you go into the gym and you're exercising. Well, maybe you get sore the next day. So you're like, I'm not going to work legs again today. I'm changing to something else. It's this adaptation, but you still have this vision of what it is you want and why you want to get there. And it's just the chart, the course that you chart is what changes as you kind of evaluate in the present moment.
Yeah, yeah. From the time I was a kid, this notion kind of fascinated me where if I turned right, something would happen. But what if I turned left? Or what if I just turned 3 degrees? And it kind of reminds me, I collect kaleidoscopes. And you're
Ooh,
looking at this beautiful image and you just turn it just a smidge and the whole picture changes. Every choice we make is moving us in, some direction. And we don't always know, that it's going to turn out the way we want. But being intentional increases the likelihood that there'll be alignment between the outcome and what we're wanting.
I love that. And I love the idea of alignment because, you know, and one of the things too that I realized um early on is that there's two things that I really like with this. But I remember when I was a kid, my mom took us out and we had one summer that was the sports summer. And I I don't remember a ton, but I remember that summer my mom got us into like 20 different sports classes to try them out and to see what we liked and what we didn't like. And one of the things that I realized over that summer were there were certain sports that I was really bad at, and there were other sports that I was kind of bad at. And there were things that I didn't enjoy too, and I recognized that, like, a couple things I realized: tennis, not my thing. I did not like being out in the sun. It was hot and just it wasn't where I was feeling the greatest. Golf, definitely not my thing. I that walking on the grass, I don't know, just again the heat and the sun wasn't my thing. But then I found that when I got into martial arts and I got the chance to hit someone, man, I enjoyed that. I liked boxing, I liked martial arts, and it was interesting because it was when you find something that you align with, that you enjoy, and it it's almost like you can get into this, like I've had people come on and talk about the flow state. Like it just becomes effortless. You get into that space where these things flow and they're fun. And it is like once you align with that vision, the choices aren't, things don't become easier, but it becomes easier to realize which choices are going to take you in the direction that you want to go, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes tons of sense. And when I translate this to the workplace, what it really triggers for me is that when leaders have the kind of trusting, psychologically safe kind of relationship with their folks and earn the right to understand where their interests and passions lie, at that point, you've got just such a powerful partnership there between the leader and the individual to be able to set the terms for an engaging workplace. Work that actually taps people's skills and interest, which, is good for the individual, but selfishly, it's also good for the leader in the organization.
Right. And it's interesting too because um, we get. I love that the earn that. Uh, it's so true. When I was younger, I studied acting. And I've done a lot of different weird things, but I studied acting, and one of the coolest things that when I was studying acting is that there was this concept that your character cannot achieve anything unless you earn it. If your character wants to have a meal, you have to earn having that meal. You can't just have, a character walk out and suddenly start eating. There has to be an earning of that meal. There has to be a love. If love is given, it has to have been earned. And one of the things that it makes the acting more rich. It makes the character's portrayal of something more rich, because if your character, dies at the end of the movie, well, you sure as heck better have earned it. Otherwise, it's going to feel flat and people are going to be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And when we translate that to the workplace or to any other thing, you know, leaders, you can have a person who can walk into a room and they might have a title of a leader, but then they have never really led. Today, I was looking at this LinkedIn post, and this businesswoman posted a very interesting photo. On the left, it says "Me now," and it stated like her boss just said to her, "I hope that you'll be able to handle this leadership role." And then it said a picture of her on the right, "Me and my former job." And it was a picture of her in a military uniform. And it said underneath, "Me commanding my 400 people that were under my command." And it was just this
Mm,
interesting because she earned it. She's earned that. She has earned those stripes quite literally. And yet, you move into a new environment and they didn't even understand what was earned. It's just wild to me.
yeah. And you move into a new environment and what you earned before, not just in terms
Might
of
not.
whatever, kind of psychological or growth pieces, what you learned before changes. So how she commanded 400 troops is not probably going to be the same as a 12-person project team that's revamping the IT system or whatever it might be.
Right.
So it's an
100%.
opportunity to re-earn and relearn.
I love that, to re-earn and relearn, because at the end of the day, all of us are, there's a concept in Chinese medicine, another thing that I studied, that talks about how um, w- if you want to be truly alive, it's always, you have to be in the flow. You have to be constantly moving and constantly adapting. And if you look at that in the business world, that change is the only constant. That companies are growing and companies are rising and falling, and that there will always be a new top dog, a new company that is the top. And other things are changing. And for a person in their career, you just have to constantly be, and we're standing at the brink of a major change and shift with, many jobs being, I'm not going to say made obsolete, but changing. as AI enters this arena, there's this big change on the horizon. And we can be people who are afraid of change or people that embrace it and embrace, again, our potential to grow with it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to date myself now. I started working in this leadership space back in the 80s. And I remember at the time writing programs and giving speeches about, change is the only constant. We're really in the white water phase now of change. It was all about change management. And what's changed about that is just the pace of it today. It's
Mm,
only gotten
right.
faster, which I think breeds a need not just for a receptivity to change and understanding that that's the way of the world, and getting in the flow is the only way to survive, but also I think it breeds a really amplified need for adaptability, flexibility, being nimble, being able to make those, zigs and zags and really quick adjustments that, in contrast, I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. In contrast to what we were talking about, intentionality and making conscious choices, in some cases in this world that we're in, we need to be able to also make a quick choice that,
Yeah.
90% of the time is going to be right on, because not moving, in Chinese medicine, what does that mean? I mean, that means we're dead, right?
Yeah. Stagnation. You mean there's no life. Let me ask you this. What traits or character traits or what choices make a great leader?
I think at its core, great leaders have a desire to serve. At
Mm,
the end of the day, it's about the team, it's about the mission, it's about the customer. It's about serving through others. The best leaders I know are humble. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of humility there. They're facilitators, like we were talking about before, finding ways to, through their questions, their encouragement, the conversations, the alignment, to allow others to be the ones who are making things happen and really shining. So I think that's one dimension that's essential for really um, profound and sustainable leadership. I think the other thing has to do with a deep caring for people. Leaders really, their whole role is predicated on the assumption that you have followers, and
yeah,
folks
right.
are not, especially today. I mean, the workplace has changed, the workforce has changed. People are not going to just, salute and follow blindly. It goes back to earning the right, and leaders earn that right for someone to be a follower by actually demonstrating care, making an investment in people, treating them as holistic beings rather than just a cog in the wheel that comes in and, delivers certain output at the end of the day. I think those two things, they're such, internally driven sorts of behaviors. But if leaders have those two things going, then it's sort of like the rest of it: communication, strategy, execution, like all of that. You can learn that. That's easy. If you don't have the heart for it, not so much.
It's interesting. And you are right. Things are changing. I was watching the TV show Mad Men recently, and I had never watched it when it first came out. I have no idea why I missed it, but I was rewatching it, and I was just struck by the contrast of the workplace in that time period and now. It was a very very different world, and what's wild to me is that beyond just the things that are obviously different, the way that the team leaders interacted with people were very different. Like if you tried to have that leadership style now, you know, beyond certain, businesses on Wall Street and stuff, but even there, I don't think it's going to fly. I think you're going to have people revolting and pushing back. And already they're talking about, with Jin. Gen Z, and Gen Z has been doing this whole new practice where they get the job offer and they just don't show up. And it was kind of a little bit of a defiance that, you took so long to try it, to even get to this point in the hiring process. We're going to make you feel what we felt. And it's wild because there is a very much, how do you take a person who views the world this way and then lead them? Because they're obviously not going to take the same level of BS, to say it nicely, that people in the past would. And so it's like, it's very much a I don't know if the word fits or not, but it's almost like leadership is transactional. Like, where, or there's not maybe transactional, but there's an exchange. Like, I have to give you something that allows you to trust me, to allow us to journey together.
And I might label that relational as
Yeah,
opposed to I
relational.
mean, there are transactions, but those exchanges are operating on a very personal level. I'm being vulnerable and authentic with you. I'm inquiring about your broader world. I'm advocating for you. Those sorts of offerings, if you will, are what create the kind of, I don't know, I guess emotional bank account. It's been used a lot, but the bank account in employees, Gen Z or otherwise, because the truth is, great talent always has options. No matter what the marketplace is like, best and your brightest will always have another offer out there that they can take advantage of. And we know from the research that employees don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. And so when leaders understand the really, gosh, pivotal role they play in the lives of these individuals, but also, in the lives of their companies, it really, I think it's a real awakening for some leaders who maybe don't understand the significance of that role.
Yeah. And there very much is I think, a waking up happening for people that, um, the system, not the system, but people want to find meaning as well. They want to find that purpose. And it's like, one of the interesting things is that when I have interacted with leaders who believed in what they were doing, the other day, we were again cleaning up the family space, and there was a couple of my family members that I love them, but they don't like to necessarily pull their weight all the time. And there was a mess that was left, and I texted my wife because it's my wife's house, and then she allows siblings to live here, adult siblings with their families, which is, it's a different dynamic than what would happen in the U.S. But we all have we have our different apartment like floors, and so what I'm bringing up is that I kind of went in, and I'm always the type of lead from the front. So we went up, and I said, what, I'm cleaning the kitchen, and I absolutely deep clean the kitchen. I like deep cleaning. I like, the OCD part of me likes to get things really clean. And when it was done, and she's like, well, leave some of it for them. And I said this, and I said, if I leave it for them, certainly I understand, like, I don't feel comfortable asking people to do more if I'm not doing more. So, like, if I do it clean, really well, I set the standard, and then we enter to a relationship, and then we re-engage and say, hey guys, this is the standard that we need to hit. And then, and when I did that, and everyone stepped up to the plate, they were like, you know what, I really appreciate what you did. And then we just modeled it. But it was like, if I could have yelled at people for days and it just wouldn't work. But it was like, being able to, and why I bring that up is, like, in the workplace, when I find a manager who believes in what they're doing, who that leadership style of leading, not just from the front, but with heart, if that makes sense, is powerful.
Yeah, yeah. And you used the word modeling. It's so much about modeling. I mean, followers are going to follow the leader. The leaders lead. And the question I think most leaders need to ask, am I setting an example that I want other people to follow?
Yes.
And it gets back to our conversation about intentionality, doesn't it? The other thing that you were talking about is this sense of purpose and meaning. And one of my books, Promotions is so yesterday, is all about redefining career development in ways beyond the classic climbing the corporate ladder. And I've got a framework there, and we've done tons of research around it. But what's really fascinating, every time we run the numbers, I just have to smile, is the number one dimension, the thing that people are most interested in, and it has been the case since COVID days, right through our latest run of last year's data, is contribution. People they wake up in the morning, and many people want to make a difference. They want to leave things better. They want to live on purpose. And when leaders recognize that and are able to support and enable that expression of contribution, it's the ultimate win-win, the individual and the organization.
100%. And it's interesting because I love this. I've been reading more about, like, we so often view things as black or white, win or loss, but really there can be multiple people that win. We can all be winning, and it's just a reframing of seeing that.
No, when both parties win, that's the only sustainable win. When you've got a winner and
Yes,
a loser, when you've got the scales out of balance, the universe, it doesn't like that. It's going to find a way for things to keep teeter-tottering back and forth. When we find those win-win outcomes, I mean, you look at negotiators and all sorts of contexts. When both parties come out feeling like I got what I needed out of that, you're home free.
100%. What about, let me ask you this. A person who is going up through their career, whether it's early or later, what can people do to have a really great career? What can they do to have to feel this validation in their work and career life?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that float to the top. One is they really need to know that they own their careers. But that doesn't
Mm,
mean they're in it on their own. They still need a partner in their manager, supervisor, the organization. But at the end of the day, nobody's going to care about your career as much as you do. And so owning your career is really key, being the captain of this ship and marshaling the resources that you need in order to navigate in the direction that you want. So I think that's really key. And the second thing is to build a solid relationship with your manager or supervisor, because you can't do it by yourself, because you do need their support, and endorsement and advocacy and all sorts of things. Having the kind of relationship with someone that is reciprocal, that goes both ways, where trust is running high, where communication lines are open, it just creates the kind of environment where you can make requests, where you can invite feedback, where there's a sense of confidence, that my boss has my back in this, sometimes risky process of learning and growing and building a career.
there was one of the words that I've seen people pick up lately that I just really enjoy is, like, people are talking more and more about finding your tribe, finding your community, finding the people that really support you. And I um I had remembered that I saw this one post, and it was a story describing this workplace, and how this team, literally, they really stood up for each other in all areas of their life, and it was just powerful to see this community, this workplace where people were, and I know that there are a lot of people that are going, you know what, your work doesn't care about you, this and that, but, like, maybe your company is not always going to be the one who's got your back, but your team can be people that do step up and support you. I remember there's a friend of mine who has a knife company, and he is a former Navy SEAL, and he supports his team like nothing else. If a people need a house, he will be the person who tries to help find them a house. If they need a car to get someplace, if they need a ride somewhere, he's there. And it's just this powerful belief and understanding that people are important. And if you want to have a successful company, you're not going to get there unless you are supporting the people. I have a team of video editors that work for me, and my chief editor is wants to go to China for 10 days to travel and have fun. And she's like, is it okay that I go away for 10 days? And I said, life is short and precious. If you have the opportunity to travel to China, enjoy it, learn, see the world, and then bring back that richness when you come back. Because of course we want you back. But you have to start off by caring and like to find workplaces where you are not just valued, but really respected, supported, and part of something bigger. And I'm not talking the company. I'm talking about this group of people that can build something together, because that transcends a company, that transcends the company culture. It is something more.
Right. Right. Oh, so much to unpack there. First, just the generosity of spirit that you described, both for yourself and for your former Navy SEAL friend. That sense of generosity and caring, and when you care about someone, and it takes that kind of form. I mean, talk about earning loyalty. How do you walk away from that relationship? That becomes real. Not that you want, handcuffs on your people, but it's just the kind of bond that one normally would not want to let go of. But the other thing is, you're right. There is tremendous interest in connection and community. That same research that I was just talking about from my book, we found that connection is actually more important to people, just like contribution, than climbing the corporate ladder. People crave that sense of community, that we're in this together, the relationships and the partnerships. For the psychological safety dimension of it, but also we learn so much with and through others, that those communities give us a sense of well-being, but also open the door to really powerful learning opportunities as well.
Yeah, it is because it, there was, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if a person is in survival and they feel like that workplace, I remember one of the worst jobs I ever had was a very large and prestigious resort in the Napa Valley. And my brother had worked there, and I moved up there to work at the same company. And I started working, and the supervisor was literally the worst boss I have ever had in my life. 2 days into the job, there were all of these little things. And like, I remember once that, what was it? She just, it was not respectful. There was this one specific thing where I had a tiny bit of scruff, and I thought that in the company's policy was clean shaven. And I was like, okay. And I was a manager level role at this. And it wasn't like I didn't come in, I wasn't looking disheveled. I was wearing a suit, but I had a tiny bit. And she was like, and I said, oh, my apologies. I am very sorry about that. I will, as soon as tomorrow, I'll be clean shaven. And she looked at me and she said, there are razors in the bathroom. Go shave now. And I was like, oh, okay. I've got really sensitive skin. I would like to go home and use my own razor, because I will break out if I use yours and my skin will have problems for the next week. There's one bathroom. You can either go or not go. And I was just like, wow. And I went to HR, and I remember speaking to them, and and then like later on, I pulled them aside. I was like, yeah, I don't feel like so supported in this job. I don't feel like this is really a positive work environment right now. And And then a couple days later, she's like, I just started looking at me, and I was like 3 weeks into the job. And I am the type that I give 110% for everything. I give great customer service. I am a hard worker, about as hard as they come. And then she pulled me aside and she was like, I don't know. And this was out of the blue. Like, I didn't do anything that day. And I was just like, came in, was like doing my training. And she was like, I don't know if I made the right decision with you. And I was just like, oh, man, wow. Wow. And it was such a nightmare that looking back, I sit there and go, what? Who thinks that that can be a statement that can help someone succeed? I was like, I resigned, and I was just like, I don't need this. And I was like, in HR, then had to go and patch it up with my brother and patch it up with, and like, apologize to me. And they were like, they were telling my brother, we're really sorry about this. We hope our relationship's okay. And he was like, I feel a little bit burned because, I've worked for you guys for a long time and I've heard stories about this person, as a manager. And like, now this has affected us directly. But he's like, that's his stuff. I work under a great team and I have a great manager.
Mhm.
But it was really
Mhm.
interesting because it was just shocking, like, that someone could be so toxic. But yet there are people out there that are toxic, and it's wild that I just want to put it out there so that people can say, if you're the person dealing with that toxic work situation, there are better jobs out there. There are better managers out there. There are great leaders out there. And if you're the leader, be better.
Yeah, yeah. And, I mean, at its core, this was feedback gone horribly wrong. I mean, it's important to
Right.
have feedback in the work. And if your appearance was out of sync with what the expectation was, then there was a way to say, hey, Sean, I know you're new and it might be unclear that the scruff is not something that we do here. Our customers kind of are expecting a different vibe, and so let's turn off your video today just so that there's no disconnect. And if you'd be willing, tomorrow to shave and come in clean shaven, that would be great. You probably would have been fine,
I
and
would
your
have been like,
face would have been
no
fine as well.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and apologized, for the whole thing. And, if she was having concerns for whatever reason, it sounds like she was just a piece of work. But to sit down and say, "Hey, Sean, how is it going? What's your experience? Does this feel like a good fit? Where are you struggling? How can we help?" But just to say, oh, the external, externalizing your thinking with in such a cruel way, clearly not leadership.
But it comes back to what I feel that you're saying too is it's communication. And I think that, really focusing on like empathetic communication, like what you just did was communication with empathy. Like, Sean, maybe we didn't communicate this so well. Oh, you know what? I didn't see that in the I had this mountain of stuff that I was processing on protocol, how to do billing, services offered, the whole 9 yards. I missed this part because it wasn't really emphasized to me because I've been having everyone emphasize this, and it was just this breakdown in communication. But yet then writing that can be done differently. And it's like I've also had absolutely amazing leaders, where people who I remember I had a professor in university that was a family friend. And when my parents were going through a divorce. He knew my parents when they were kids, and he had been seeing my family grow. And he pulled me into his office. He said, "Sean, you're not passing my class right now." And I said, "No, I got a lot going on." And he said, "Tell me about that. Let's hear your story and tell me how I can help." And it was this true leader. Like, it wasn't just a teacher, but he was a leader in that moment of righting my ship. And what was interesting is that one person was responsible for me graduating university, maintaining my GPA and finishing up my degree and moving on into the professional world. But there was this moment there where you have this potentiality. I had the potential to fix things, to be better. I also had the potential to fall and go the wrong direction. And like the first position, there was potential in Sean to be a great leader in that organization. There was potential for me to have a 40-year career there where I rise up through the ranks and became one of the, but instead I left the job after 3 weeks. So where does the fault lie in that? I would put this on the leaders for being able to harness the potential and to be able to harness the best in the worker, and to bring out the gem.
Yeah, yeah. And your professor, I mean, clearly saw you as more than just a student on the roll sheet. Just like leaders who see their employees as more than just a head count who's here to get a certain job done. When we see the whole person, when we're willing to entertain getting to know that whole person and being able to respond with empathy, I mean, it goes back to building the trust that then creates that foundation for people to make the best decisions possible for themselves. So, just like my kaleidoscope, that conversation caused you to turn it just a bit and everything fell into the right way forward.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last question. If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what advice would you give yourself?
Mellow out, take a breath. You're not going to worry about this in 20 years. In 20 minutes, you probably won't worry about this. I was so high strung. And I mean, yeah, I'm acting like I've evolved. I'm still high strung. My future self needs to be talking to my current self. But, I think, those of us who care a lot and want things to be just so can put so much pressure on ourselves that it's immobilizing and it's exhausting. And so much of it just doesn't matter. So let it go.
I love it. I was listening to my daughter. We were watching an old video where she was singing "Let It Go, Let It Go." Gotta love that song because sometimes
Yes.
you literally just have to let it go.
Yep. Yep.
Where can people find you and more of your work?
I kind of live on my website, juliewinklegiulioni.com, as well as LinkedIn, juliewinklegiulioni.com as well.